Hey everybody, and welcome to the Rabbit Trail Podcast. This is episode number 114.
114.
Woo-hoo! We're excited, and this has been a blast. We've been having a great time just kind of talking about all different kinds of things that come from our Sunday sermons at Olive Branch Community Church. It's the church that sponsors this podcast, and we are running down the truth wherever it runs, kind of like chase it, go. But anyway, my name is Greg Harris. I'm the senior pastor at Olive Branch, and we are picking up and discussing topics that were either brought up at the sermon or questions that you guys have offered to us. And we're glad that you are with us and that we're just glad to have these conversations. It's a lot of fun, especially when you guys interact. Then it's a blast. I love it when we get interaction. And I think we got some interaction today, right, guys? But before we do that.
But I just want to say that, running down truth wherever it runs.
Chasing.
Okay, we do need to take this board and put it over there, kind of like a teleprompter.
So I can read it? Yeah.
So you can read it.
I get it wrong a lot.
A lot. And I will say that we are a group.
Say it.
We are a group of guys here that have no grace whatsoever when somebody makes a mistake. It is like you make a mistake, everybody piles on you and just beats you up with it.
Is this how you feel?
Between the three of us.
You mean we're guys?
We're guys.
This is how you feel about us?
Yeah. No, you guys never pick on me.
Do you want to open something up?
No.
Anyway.
I'm already talking to my counselor about it. I'll be fine.
Good. So we'll talk about some counselor stuff today.
Great.
No, just kidding. Anyway, so why don't you guys say hi, my co-hosts?
Counselor.
All right. My co-hosts, say hi, guys.
Hello, my name is Stephen Oldham. I'm the local outreach coordinator here at Olive Branch. Thank you for listening. If you're listening to us on Spotify and on Apple iTunes, let us know. Reach out to us if you can. You can reach out to us through the email address, which Brent's going to share here in a minute. But let us know what your audio levels are like. I'd be interested to know what's your experience listening on your podcast.
We are working on it again.
Yeah, we're working on different levels because different formats might have different levels. But if you are an audio listener as opposed to a video listener, I'd love to get your input on how it feels from that end of the spectrum. And also give us stars and subscribe there as well.
And also if there was change, because I know that we have heard a while back that the volumes were really low, and then when the podcast is over, their music is breaking their windows in their car.
That was happening to me. So that's why I've been readdressing it.
Yeah.
So I'm trying to get it figured out. I'm also the producer.
So I would like to know if it was bad and then it got better and now it's getting bad again, or if you feel like the levels are sufficient. So
yeah, and reach out to us on the email address. But also, again, if you're also watching on YouTube, you can always subscribe and like there. Let us know how those audio levels are as well. But yeah, we'd love to hear from you and continue to give us your feedback.
Feedback.
How do they do that?
You know what? One of the ways that you can either ask a question or make a comment to us that we would love to read and share. Do that at rabbittrail@obcc.church. Email it to rabbittrail@obcc.church.
We do check it.
We do, and we got a comment and we got a question today.
In fact, Brent is going to therapy because he checks it so often and nothing's there.
It's not that nothing's there all the time.
Feel rejected.
It's more, I do have rejection issues in my life and low self-esteem. And so when I don't hear that, and if you guys could just encourage me, tell me how wonderful I am, that would be appreciated greatly. And I don't have a bad joke today. I have
Brent and his terrible jokes.
I have a church spiritual truth today. And that
I
is,
can't sing that
and I
one.
did send you guys this meme, a few days ago. But the Christian truth that I will share with you right now is this: that every family has secrets until the Sunday school teacher asks the group of children for prayer requests.
It's very true, actually. Yeah,
it is.
I think that's kind of funny. I was just thinking, the only science joke I can remember that fits with Christianity shows up in a lot of different books, but it's I think it's a Far Side one where it's the guy's writing on the chalkboard and he's got these equations and it's this arrow, and then a miracle happens, and his conclusion, the guy's I think you need to work on that middle part.
Well, we got a question online too, so that'll be an interesting question.
Online where?
It's a YouTube.
Oh, really?
So sweet.
Okay.
Sort of, yeah.
With it's a question.
It's just one
We
related
love
to
it
the sermon.
when there are questions.
Wow.
And so thank you guys for asking those questions and bringing them out. And in fact, your jokes, man, you don't have a terrible joke today. So I gotta.
That was kind of a joke.
That's good. That's good.
Kind of a joke.
Yeah.
To me, it's just humor.
I think we should have like a verse of the day. Like each one of us should select
Verse
like
of the day, verse of the day.
or a verse of the podcast. Like, some random verse that we just pull up out of nowhere. It's like, it'd be so fun. Just like we do like, all right, verse of the day.
Like Ouija board Bible
Right.
study.
We obligate ourselves to bring the first fruits of our ground and the first fruits of all the fruit of every tree year by year to the house of the Lord.
Okay.
Wow.
This is the
The
word.
rabbit trail. Okay, maybe not. Maybe that's a bad idea. Okay, so
Okay.
let's
So,
dive in.
so anyway, we are in the.
Sure, that ministered to somebody.
Yeah.
I
For those
needed
of you-
that one. I'm gonna tab.
The Holy Spirit never stops working. So again, you guys could look at Romans 1, but it's the topic that we are on right now. It's a series called Assumptions, and it's just basically
Assumptions gone
looking
viral.
at.
Gone
Is that what it
viral.
is?
Yeah, it's like the idea that they're all out there. You know.
Okay. And the idea is just how people assume the church operates or feels. And so this one was the assumption that people believe that Christians are anti-science or afraid of science.
I'd say Christianity because some Christians are anti-science and afraid of science. So I did. That's why I try to say Christianity because I want to be clear that I'm not talking about individual. Christians vary from Christian to Christian on their viewpoints of all these different things. So as we're going to talk next week about hate, there are some Christians that hate people, and that's scary. And then there are some, there are Christians who think that, hey, this is all about just going to heaven. So I'm trying to say no, Christianity, like as what it truly teaches versus sometimes how it's practiced by us fallen sinners. So
I would say
that's a clarification.
I would also say, just like I was listening, and this was about a while back, but even like someone like a Neil deGrasse Tyson, he was talking about faith and Christianity, even his views, which are pretty antithetical to Christianity, would say he still thinks it's a small majority of Christians who really have opposition to what he does on the other side, and vice versa.
He thinks it's a small majority of Christians?
A small minority, sorry. A small minority of Christians that are more vocal.
I've never heard of a small majority.
Yeah, well, I have, but it's political. But to me, though, that's an important thing that at least both of us are recognizing that on both sides of the quote-unquote debate, that this may not be as big a debate as we think it is.
Yeah, there's been a lot of correction in the last 10 years for people just going, hey, time out. You can't say that kind of stuff. And I really have to credit John Collins, who, well, I think he did some pretty awful things to puppy dogs and stuff, but he was the head of the NIH for years and has been very vocal as a evangelical Christian. So he's actually been one of those guys that has really pushed back on that whole, hey, hold on a second here. You can't say Christians aren't in the world of science. So you got like James Tour, who's out there also very, very vocal about his faith. And he's like...
Got a lot of patents.
Yeah, and he's like a world-renowned or he works on... I mean, just basically, he's a
biochemistry, right?
Yeah, biochemical engineer. So
Yeah.
I mean, build a car out of atoms, and
They raced them across the head of a penny, and it was like a whole science competition. It was really interesting if you look it up.
Yeah,
You don't have to watch it on a Christian channel. It totally was out there on all the science stuff.
yeah.
And
He's got all these patents. One
really
of them
cool.
is really cool. It's like on graphene. And it's
Graphene's
just
like the state of the future.
super
A lot of
cool.
research going into the uses of graphene to replace some of the things that are going on now. So,
And if I don't believe it, I'm a science denier. Is that right?
or something like that.
Okay.
What do you think?
I don't know. But one of the statements you made, and I know we touched on this beforehand, and you shot me down, but I will take I will take that bullet on air too, just because I think it's an interesting question. Science. During the sermon, you said science cannot answer the question of why, only how. So I just wanted, what did you mean by that? Expound on that, because my first reaction was, okay, I get that science can't speak to motive because motive is a personal thing. We teach that in, conflict resolution and, premarital counseling is don't ascribe motive to the actions of the other, because you're going to just get in an argument and a fight that you can't prove. Stay on topic with just what is the problem, what is the action that you are trying to resolve. So I do understand that that we can't speak of motive in that regard, but science can answer why questions such as, okay, why do the planets circle the sun? I mean, obviously they've said, it's because of the gravity pull and and so everything is circling because gravity is holding everything together. That's a why question to me. Okay, why don't the planets just drift off? Because of gravity. That's a why question and a why answer. But you're saying it's not. And also like when you're looking at medical things, why does this happen? Well, this happens because, bacteria has invaded this and infected this area. And so to me, those seem like why questions that get answered.
It depends on if you're talking to a 5-year-old.
Well,
pile on.
Yeah,
punk.
No, 5-year-olds have some of the most sophisticated responses to things. You ever really want to know something, ask a 5-year-old. Because if I say, hey, why does the world spin around? And I give them a sophisticated answer like that, they go, well, why is there gravity? Well, because gravity is like, well, why is there this? And then why? So you're asking the why question. You keep asking the why question. And I think that's why, to me,
maybe I'm just a weirdo because...
So I just want to point out this, right?
Yeah.
I mentioned this question and go, I feel like an answer. And he's going, that's because you're as dumb as a 5-year-old. And I'm like, well, and then he like tries to compliment me. You're as dumb as a 5-year-old. But 5-year-olds ask pretty intriguing questions.
There you go. No, I've learned a lot from 5-year-olds, if that means anything. But but I do think it's important because I do think kids are getting on the fundamental response to things. The idea that we keep asking questions and then giving answers, but that's not the question they asked. And so there was even a joke that someone mentioned where some kid asked a question and they asked some simple question and they gave them the complicated answer and they just wanted to know why. Why do I have to go to bed? Well, the sunrise. You're like, no. It's a simple response. Yeah. All I want to know is
what purpose do you have for me?
What is the purpose that you have for me going to bed?
That's good enough.
Yeah. So the question that people are often asking is what are the mechanics of a thing? And that's not the same question as why does it exist? What is its purpose? And I see this a lot with the Bible. The Bible often, in the ancient world, they wanted to know why things happened because what are the meaning of that thing? Not like, oh, well, it's a fiery gas ball in the sky. Well, that's great. But that wouldn't have meant anything to them. It would have meant something more interesting to them to know what is the purpose of it for us as humanity. Why do I exist with this thing? What is its higher meaning?
Actually, what's interesting is when I looked up the word why and just kind of did a quick search on the word in our English Bibles, it always is a question aimed at God or another person. We don't, in the Bible, ever use the word why and ask some material question about the nature of the universe. And that's because we have dropped, with the advent of the scientific revolution, the idea that why is actually a significant question in its real way. Like when you ask it about a material world, I remember talking to an atheist friend and just like, we can't answer the why thing. He's like, why doesn't matter anymore. Yeah. He doesn't care. He doesn't care why it's there. He's just really interested in how it works and how it got there. And so we sometimes supplement colloquially, there's our word again, why for how, or why for how did it get there, or a historical question.
Does it work?
And how, yeah. So, but, so like why do the planets circle around the sun? Are you asking a historical question there? Or you ask, because why is too vague. If you're asking why God did that, well, that's a different question. If you're asking how it got there to be this way, that's a historical question. If you're asking how it works mechanically, which is another way we can use why, but you're not answering the real
purpose
question that why is intended for, which is purpose and intent. There's a reason. And so
if you're a materialist, you're not going to concern yourself with those reasons. They're not as important to you because the mechanics is what you're more interested in.
But my problem is the way that we often import reason, because we're reason-making creatures. So like I was joking with David Attenborough, and talking about the monkeys or whatever throwing poo. And, it's kind of like, you don't ask the monkey why it threw the poo. They go, well, this is because he's trying to assert his dominance within the. It's like, maybe. I mean, do you really know why they're doing what they're doing? I mean, this is really a problem in biological zoology and stuff. They call it the anthropomorphic issue.
Yeah.
You don't know how to describe animal behavior
apart from
attributing human behavior. And so you end up with a lot of really odd evolutionary theories about the evolutionary psychology is considered one of the oddest things out there, because it's really a science without a subject. They're literally looking at things current and going, well, we're guessing this is how it happened. Well, you have no evidence. You can't go back to the caveman and ask him. You can't go back
if you're talking about historic anthropology.
Right. It's historical anthropology, or even this is the case with archaeology, runs into some of these problems. They make interpretive
evolutionary
guesses.
Psychology would do that as well.
Yeah, and they make these guesses about what the object is.
They're inferences,
and what it's used for. And there's been some very funny historical cases we've mentioned from this special idol that we found it here, we found it there, and it turns into they finally dug one up in Egypt that was fully complete. It was a board game that it was like one of the earliest board games ever played. And you're like, hey guys, like, you get stuff wrong a lot. You don't know why they chose to do that. You know what they had, you know when they had it, you know who might have had it.
Yeah.
But to answer why is extremely difficult for science, because it's not a purpose-seeking tool. It is a cause-effect tool, and it is a historical tool. And so forensic science, like I said, is probably about the closest we get to getting to a why, because they're trying to eliminate options of reasonings that we know could be, and so that the evidence points to the person doing it. And one of those, you got to have kind of a motive, right? You got to have us detectives here, because we do want to promote our detective side, which one day we should just do our detective podcast
as a podcast,
and just talk out how we figured out all the detective work.
How we
You would
solve
tell people what that
murders
is?
on a regular basis.
Yes,
like the Scooby-Doo gang.
What game is it called again?
It's called Hunt the Killer.
Yeah.
We play hunter-killer.
We do.
And so we like it, and we do it together, and we always have to find the means, the motive, and the opportunity. And the hardest thing is that you're digging through all kinds of material to produce hypothetical considerations of the why, the means.
Or the most likely.
Well, that's because you're dealing with people who are telling you a lot of different things about what they do. Forensics is a study of people, but when you're talking about a science on physics or a science on
hard
zoology,
sciences and soft sciences, and I think people need to keep that in mind, because we often do conflate the difficulties. We all think science is just science, but each branch of science has its own kind of difficulties with what it's trying to do, and there are way more confounding variables in softer sciences, and that's the one that we rely on the most sometimes, that I see, to live our lives. And then the harder sciences are the ones that there are some real world ramifications to hard science, but that they're less tangible to your daily life and your living in some ways, until someone explains them to you.
Yeah, actually, I think that the hard sciences are more applicable through technology.
Yeah.
They create the base upon which we make advancements in using nature to produce cultural movement and to produce
to
bring nature under our submission, that kind of stuff. That's what the hard sciences bring: chemistry, physics.
Yeah, when you measure something like in chemistry, if you measure it accurately without any kind of variables accidentally being put in the mix, you're going to get almost the exact same number every single time.
Not if I'm doing it. I used to tell you guys, like, when we would do labs, I love this. I love the abstract stuff. Like, give me some moles to add together and do all this stuff, and let me play with the shape of the p orbital and the s orbital and all the different stuff and how they work. I loved that. But man, put me in the lab and make me do stuff, and I would like knock it over and be like, scrape it back into the test tube because it was near the end, and so I'd get like over like 100% error. And it's like, you can't have that.
Confounding variable.
Oh, and I'm always.
You're the
my
confounding
ADD
variable.
is the confounding variable, because I just can't pay attention long enough and be careful enough.
Inter-rater reliability factors.
Look, this doesn't work. That's you. Oh.
So basically, you are saying why is strictly a motive.
I actually believe why is answered by philosophy and persons, not by science.
Because this says that Y is also the 25th letter of the alphabet. So,
All right.
So yeah, there is always more than meets the eye. So
That meets the Y.
yes.
Oh boy, there's your bad joke for the day.
Oh, Y is also a place you can go to go get exercise.
MCA. Ooh, yes.
But I do think that it's important to remember that when you're watching your science shows, that when you hear them starting to describe the means and the motives of planets and, I think the funniest thing is we claim, animals are just all about propagating their genes. Did we interview a whole bunch of these animals? And that's I don't understand, when did that become this is the sole means and reasons? And I guess I get it. It's a pleasure, but it's just kind of one of those, we can talk about it in terms that actually has nothing to do with
Again,
why.
I think what's interesting...
if you're in science, you know the answer to that. I would love to hear it. It's just one of those weird ones.
Because there are a lot of migratory patterns and a lot of things that animals do that have a certain predictability to it.
Very predictable.
Yeah, and a lot of times when you do psychology research, you work on rats because there are strong similarities between mice and rat behavior and human behavior in certain chemical responses, especially in certain puzzle solving scenarios. So we've had some advancements there, but there's still limitations to something like that when you're trying to apply it to a human being. It is more hard science when you're going through these experiments, because if I do something to a chemical in your brain, I do something that has a similar apparatus to it. There's a similarity and a difference that needs to be mapped out.
Here's another example. I was just listening to the Thinking Biblically podcast, Talbot's podcast. Great podcast. Check it out if you're interested. They just did one on a whole podcast on free will. There's a book out there, and the scientist is arguing.
Is that the killer whale that was in captivity?
No, not Free Willy. Free Will. Yeah.
Free will? Is that the short
that's
version?
The guy from...
familiar version.
It's actually what they were yelling in Stranger
Vid
Things.
Angel version of Free Willy is Free Will.
Oh, it's the Vid Angel version of Stranger Things, right? Free will. Anyway, this free will argument that there is no free will, everything's determined by chemical and science and all that stuff, and they do a good job from the philosophical position of just going whatever, and it's because again it gets back to that argument I was making that science needs an observer and it can't produce an observer because you can't trust your beliefs if they're just created by random chemicals and stuff. In fact, they argue that you have no control over your beliefs. You can't make yourself change your beliefs immediately right now. Make yourself believe in this room is a pink elephant. You can say it with your words, but you actually can't make yourself believe something contrary to what you already believe. And so that's very fascinating. And so when it came to this whole stuff about free will and science, it really got down to there is no why is kind of how it winds up.
Why is an irrelevant philosophical problem is usually how a lot of people will say it when I talk to them. It's we don't need to know why. It's not useful. That's what they would say.
But now every time you guys say why, MCA pops in my head.
So
that's good.
Can you do the hand motions every time we say it?
You got why? What comes next?
MCA. But what's interesting is that here's the reality that if we're running around claiming all these animals and stuff or show us that there's only human behavior, all we are behaviorists, and the problem is that you run into people do evil.
Yeah,
and it's not evil.
It's not evil.
Literally, you don't get mad at the cat for eating the mouse.
Instinctual.
That's what they do. So if we kill somebody or we rape somebody or we do, you can't put them in a court of law. Their argument is, I don't have free will. The chemicals made me. I was destined to do this. Why would you put me? Why would you give me moral culpability, or even legal culpability? And you destroy the entire system of forensics and legal stuff because now nobody's guilty of anything. Well, everybody is just doing what they were destined to do.
We kind of hold some of these philosophical beliefs in contention with each other. We don't actually try to integrate them. And so for me, I think it is interesting if you are into science, you need a certain amount of predictability to occur in order to see or to do certain things. And so with that, there's a certain amount of like with human behavior, like if psychology doesn't work, if I can't predict what someone's going to do in certain senses, same thing with science, but there's always these confounding variables. And most people want to say those are just things we don't know and can't account for. And so that's really where the extreme version of that would say that everything is determined and then there's no room for free will. And so these arguments that we have here theologically, I found them often in science. And it's really hard for me to see anyone who's a pure determinist come up with a good reason why that would be the case, because I do think it does limit things like the way in which we make choices and the way in which we engage each other in an environment. And it doesn't always explain the confounding variables. It's kind of like the science of the gaps. Like if I don't know something, it's just because I don't have enough information.
Science will eventually figure this out.
Science will eventually figure this out if we just keep going down that road.
It is a fallacy. It started to become one they call science in the gaps.
Oh, okay.
I actually think is actually out there. It's not God in the gaps anymore as much as it's, science will figure that out. Science has no way to figure some things out.
And so everything to the contrary, when you get all this contrary evidence, if you've already predetermined the conclusion, there's no amount of evidence that will sustain you if you hold on to the belief without actually asking yourself, what if it was some things are deterministic enough to predict behavior, but not enough to know everything, and that there is something like free will? What does that mean? And for some people, if you're a pure materialist, you hold on to that determinism because that means it's something outside of you or you have choices that have real world ramifications, and something can hold you accountable.
It also, they want to get rid of, I think, the idea that there isn't something science can't talk about. It's a scientism perspective. And that's what we said. We're against scientism because we do think science is limited. I mean, it would eliminate it would move psychology into the realm of a hard science. And one of the weird things is they said, like, here's the example. They're like, this guy's writing this book to try to convince people that they don't have a free will. And so he's like, so he probably thinks somehow that, well, I'm going to write this and it'll, adjust their destined movement.
What's the point of writing the book?
Right. And so he's like, and what I love, one of the guys, he just said, if we are just meat machines, like if we're just these chemical processes going off with neurons, then one day we should be able to concoct a drug that all I have to do is put it in you and it will change your beliefs. That was the weirdest thought, because that's what would happen. It's download the Matrix.
Right.
I know Kung Fu. It's like,
create your own reality is what this is attractive for some people.
Right.
This belief. Yeah.
So anyway, that's really, I know it's a deep dive into why I think why doesn't get answered. Maybe it's better in would you call the soft sciences, like the personal sciences? Like they're dealing with people, so they're a little bit more squishy because there's an unpredictability in humanity.
Yeah, they're dealing with things that are more abstract in some regards. Even some maths kind of deal with abstracts, but like, I'm thinking like when you talk about psychology, you're talking about like software problems, not necessarily hardware. Like if I want to know why your brain isn't working and I notice that all the other brains have this chemical, if I put the brain chemical in there and you work normal, then great. But that doesn't tell me a lot about how you feel about it, or should you feel about it. That's really
on the hard science chemistry
so that's
side.
what I'm saying. So that stuff in psychology and in some of those disciplines that have that mechanic would be more like a hard science. But the ones that are like, why are people depressed and should they be? That's a very difficult response, because if you think it's a bad thing always, then you would eliminate it with a drug, right? If you think that there may be a good reason to be depressed, like it's a pain mechanism that your soul has, or even your body, if you're just a body person, that it would be good to feel bad, and because it's making you aware of a problem that you need to deal with, then you wouldn't think of it as a bad thing. These are more gray areas that have to deal with things that are more philosophical and have to do with the nature of what you think human beings are created
persons, right?
And persons. So once you get into that problem, then there are going to be a lot more debates, which is why those sciences are the ones that people don't like to talk as much about. I find the people who speak the loudest on like human behavior are usually coming from a hard science. And you're like, well, you're making a lot of conclusions about like why people do things in other disciplines and stuff. And I'm like, yeah, it feels like we're bleeding into a different discipline sometimes. But I do feel like that you should know like what area of psychology, or if it's anthropology or anything that's based on history in the past in psychology, that there are limitations within each of these fields. There's only so much that they can say without it being a speculation at some point. It's an educated speculation, and I don't want to throw that out because we live in a world of conspiracies that we want to overlook the best evidence, and it may not account for you changing your belief, but you don't want to pretend like that evidence doesn't exist. And so that's my other fear, is just that, like, in face of evidence, you just don't want to hear it, so you're not willing to integrate that into your belief system somehow.
Well, we should call on the coroner because we just murdered that question.
Yeah. Sorry. We like science. Science cool.
So, I mean, you had threw out something that we could talk about, but well, before we get there, one of the things you talked about in your sermon, and I would just encourage people to go back and look at the sermon because I thought it was a very well done, very interesting, and heard a lot of good feedback from it, even from family who are scientists, literal PhD scientists. And then that was your description of the cell, and turning into, basically organs in your body, person, and then you kind of went into environment and the universe and how everything is attached together. And it was kind of that causality thing, and really kind of a proof of God in the sense of, how powerful he is, that things are in order, so he's orderly, and all those things. So I will say that, one of the things that spoke to me when you were talking about that, and I kind of want you to expound on that a little bit too, but is the idea that you could look and take a snapshot of anything, like in the universe, all the planets aligned, yesterday or Monday for the eclipse, and, we can look at all of this stuff and take a snapshot of any instant and go, okay, you could believe in randomness, evolutionary randomness, and things just are, and that's why everything is like it is right now at that instant. But the fact to me that it is sustained, proves that there is someone that is in control of it, right? Because, anything is possible, for an instant, but it's not going to stay that way, and so the fact that there is order and design and everything proves God. And what are those called, those arguments in, like the causality and the moral argument?
There's different, like, they're basically all natural. They're called natural theology arguments. Like, you're basically arguing for God from, it's a cosmological argument, there's an ontological argument, but you're thinking these are more of what's called a teleological argument.
Yeah.
So it's like that, and that's an argument from purpose, or the design and purpose of an object. So that sort of like, hey, I found a painting. Well, teleologically, that painting has a purpose and a meaning. There must be a purpose maker and a meaning maker. Thus, an artist painted the painting, kind of thing.
And I
go ahead.
Just in a world of people wanting absolutes, I was listening to someone debate a former Christian who decided to give up the faith, and he was wrestling over the science and the evidence of it all. And what I realized is, like, he's asking questions, and he's like, I can't believe in it, that just because, even if someone rose from the dead, and that person could be God, because how would I know if that person's really God? Could be anything else. And then he goes, well, okay, then there are prophecies, and you start putting all these pieces together. In the whole, it looks more likely that he would be God than not. And the person goes, well, I can't believe that that's true, even if there were prophecies fulfilled. And so the moderator just stops and go, what would it take for you to believe in the evidence? What evidence is sufficient? What proof is sufficient for you to believe in? And he was like, I don't know. And I think that's a good place to start, is that what would you need to know in order to believe in God, or to believe in some piece of information that has value? And I think both sides are kind of doing that, in the sense that I have to decide what is a source of trustable and reliable truth that I have to integrate to my life. And then where does it fit? Like, if you tell me, take penicillin, that fits in my life when I get sick. It's not a big part of my daily life unless I'm sick. There are things that are more fundamental in science that may have a ramification on how I treat other people or how I live. live. And so we live in this world that kind of doesn't know what proof it wants, but knows that it's already made up its mind what it wants to believe. And that could be both on the Christian side sometimes, unfortunately, but also I find it a lot when people just don't want to believe the evidence that's presented in front of them, or at least speculate on it. And so I think it's a good question to ask oneself.
Yeah, I think that's a really good question to ask. And my angle was on that kind of run up with talking about design came out of my experience in high school. And I wasn't really much of a Christian in high school. I was kind of like maybe nominal and name only because, hey, I got baptized when I was 10 or whatever, and we'd gone to church. But I was in my biology course where day one, my biology teacher in high school said, I'm an atheist and I don't want to hear nothing about God in here. And just like totally illegal, but he didn't care. And but what was
now
weird.
It's illegal to do the opposite.
Oh, no, you're not supposed to do it anyway, either way. So so the weird part to me was we got into human evolution, and he was just kind of talking about like, all right, in order for us to stand upright, you need both the tilt of the pelvis to be at a particular angle, and then you need knees that literally will lock in place. Otherwise, you cannot stand upright, along with some aspects of your ankle bones and things that all other great apes and all other forms of primates do not have. None of them. There's no locking knees. There's no upright pelvises. There's no upright great apes anywhere to be found. And so I was like, so which one came first? Because I can remember going up to him like, I'm just really confused. Which evolutionary mutation happened first? I mean, if my back is straight, my pelvis tilts, and I can't lock my knees, I'm like hunched over and it hurts my back and I get back pain.
You're eaten by a lot of predators.
And I'm going to get eaten. And I said, okay, so if my knees lock and I'm running around, but I can't, I'm hunched over all the time, even when my knees are locked out. Now I'm not able to do the all four running, and it doesn't work that way. I was like, so both these things had to happen at the exact same time? He said, yes, they had to happen at the exact same time. And I'm like, what are the odds of that, along with your inner ear having to have balanced out correctly to be able to give you balance, and your spine has to have the right S-curve in order for you to have posture, and then your skeletal structure has to be such that it can maintain an upright position for a long time. I mean, I was just sitting there going like, so all that has to happen? He's like, yeah, all of it has to happen at the exact same time. And I'm just like, you don't see the overwhelming amount of change that has to happen. Yeah.
Well, just even the question, like, okay, say that did happen. Is that more of a random response, or is that more of a creative design response? What's more likely to believe that if all of these very complicated things have to occur simultaneously, that somehow I can't speculate on an outside agent being involved in that process?
Well, and now I've learned even more since then that this stuff doesn't happen. Like, we always think of evolution as occurring and suddenly,
over long periods of time,
but you don't, like, maybe you subtly see it change. But you have to remember, all evolution happens in the womb, and this has been one of those pieces that, like embryology is one of the most critical aspects of evolution, because you
see it.
Well, no, because if there's going to be a transformation of a species, it's going to happen in the womb of the original species. That what they give birth to is something that's slightly different than that, and that accretiates over time. But we know all of these gene regulatory systems that will not let the baby change. Like, they try to make it change, and the gene regulatory system will shut down the baby won't deform, and it won't be born. The calf won't form. It'll be aborted. If it does, it has massive mutational issues. You can't make them suddenly become something else. It's just it's really, really crazy what the body is not willing to do to change. And so you have this whole power of genetics pushing against change in the embryo. And so, like, that to me, and so what I started realizing is I piece through arguments of evolutionists, I'll piece through arguments of stuff out there, and I'm always like, but you're only giving us one piece. Like, you're only giving us one piece. That's why I went from the atomic structure
all the way up,
all the way to the top, because
you need a fully integrated system.
The whole system has to be integrated. I mean, we have to be in the right place in the universe for the right gravity well, for the right place in the solar system, for the right place on the planet, for the right conditions on the planet in history, to the right size, to the right condition. I mean, the right ecosystems, all this stuff has to be in place. And I didn't even get into the fine tuning of the universe problem in and of itself. Hugh Ross does a great job of this. And when you step back and you go, talk about the evolution of one species to become another, the entire ecosystem has to transform to support it. There are entire species that are dependent upon a certain type of flower. And that flower has to be there for that species to exist. And that species, guess what, pollinates that flower. And they're the only ones that pollinate. Like, they're connected in a symbiosis. How do you get there? And this is the problem that, like, you can't just evolve a new creature into an environment and be able to be adapted into that environment. And we're like, well, the environment adapted the creature. That's not how that works. That's Lamarckianism when we threw that out. And it's just, to me, I'm just kind of like, when you tie it all together and you talk about a change in any system, take a car and change one aspect of that system piecemeal, and that car's not going to run. You have to, that's why they remodel the whole car You
have to think of it as a system.
Yeah.
Or at least have an answer how your particular in the system works as part of the whole.
Not to mention the ecosphere of a car. Let's just talk about a car for a second. The ecosphere of a car is so I can transform the car. Like we go, we transformed the car to these electrical cars. Why is it not working? Well, because the ecosystem doesn't exist for these cars. There's not places to charge them. You can't actually do the things you want. You can't travel as far as you'd like to travel. In fact, there's the roads and the weather conditions don't react the same as they do with like a gasoline engine. And the whole world's designed for the gasoline engine. Well, that took a revolution of movement, of not just the
from
car.
Horse to car.
Yeah, but to the point that I think it was David, my brother-in-law, told me the story about Ingalls, the Wilder family, Laura
Ingalls Wilder.
And she talked about her
Little House on the
grandfather.
Prairie.
Yeah, she talked about her grandfather got into all kinds of accidents because he was trying to make. He couldn't understand how to use the car because he was so used to guiding the horse, and he was just like, that doesn't make sense. Like,
because it doesn't have reins and you can't pull on it.
Yeah, exactly.
Pull on the steering wheel.
He would pull on the steering wheel and make it stop,
sense.
and nothing would stop. And they would have all these crazy things because that's what happens in a revolution. I mean, where does that kind of power of change occur in the size of the whole system to the point that it's that's where I'm just like, it's not a plausible story when you get away from that one small change in the fruit fly.
And that's a bit about some of the limitations of doing science. That's part of the reason probably what we probably should do is define, because you kind of had this explanation, defining science, because what we've talked about here is several different kinds of science, right? And I think sometimes what gets pitted against religion is this idea that it's science versus religion. And I think some people have a vested interest in that debate, but I don't think it's historically true, because I was listening to a couple of lectures that it really wasn't until like the 1900s that people started to really try to draw a distinction between faith and religion, that most of your major disciplines in science, different sciences, had broader definitions of the science, but also felt no problem between having a religious faith and engaging in a particular science. And some now is almost like a litmus test for some people on where you believe on certain things in order to engage in that discipline.
You know what the word science means, right? It just means knowledge, sensia. So
that's why it's on a lot of diplomas, and you're like, that's a science?
Yeah.
Right.
And then the other side is that what's fascinating is originally we didn't call it science at all. We didn't call them scientists. They were called natural philosophers, or they were called spiritual philosophers. Psychology was a branch of theology. It wasn't its own thing. A lot of people don't realize Kierkegaard considered himself a psychologist before we actually had Freud in some regards, because he studied the human condition spiritually. So, I mean, it's just, to me, that's like, again, you have these, so if defining science is like...
It's a difficult one because everybody has a vested interest in defining it a certain way.
How would you do it, Brent? Give us a shot. I want to hear your definition of science, just from your times of thinking about it.
No, I mean, when it's just somebody asking what is science, I would say it is observation and trying to obtain knowledge. I mean, I just remember you start out with. See, this is the thing. I feel like I was taught in school that you come up with a hypothesis, meaning this is what I think the outcome is going to be. You run some tests and you observe, and then it either confirms what you thought was going to happen or it doesn't. And if it doesn't, you start over. But the other thing, too, is, when I think of science, I also think that science is not necessarily something that is settled. It is always open to new information, and it's always open to new input, and possibly new conclusions as well. And I feel like today science almost browbeats you into saying that it has the truth, and no other truths can exist. And I feel like that is false science, right? I mean, because you go back to okay, and I don't want to go political, but it's just anything is political now. But I just go back to COVID, right? During that era, and there were a lot of debates, about vaccines and about everything else.
Well, just take a simple one, a hydroxychloroquine, for example.
Yeah,
it was a super common drug used for lupus. I mean, it is still one of the main lupus drugs used, and now you mention it and people think you're being political.
Yeah.
And so the science,
and that was because a political figure threw it out there, But to me, it was like during that time, there were so many debates, so much anger toward whichever side you were on that argument. And to me, that's not science. And everybody's like, you don't believe the science. It's like, no, okay, science is, let's continue gathering information before we come to a conclusion. You might suspect, those people that were pro-vaxxers and all that stuff, you might believe that the vaccine is going to, help you and do all these things, right? And you're fine believing that, and that is your hypothesis, right? And the other ones are saying, no, this drug is going to be bad for you. It's going to mess you up. That is their hypothesis. Now, science would see, all right, let's not take a firm position on it. Let's continue to collect evidence on this and allow the evidence to tell us whether this was good or this was bad. And everybody wanted that instant answer right now, and there was a total culture war.
Yeah, and you're right, because we thought that science provides quick answers.
Right.
We don't think of science as this long, arduous, slow accretion of observations, and how do those observations work together, and there's theory, and then you're hypothesizing how those things work together, and when we're talking about the whole of nature working together and human beings monkeying around with it, I mean, there's a problem in chemistry, right? It's the Heisenberg uncertainty principle, that the observer, in observing the very thing that they're working in, creates uncertainty, because when you try, it's all dealing with, I guess, electrons. When you try to measure the speed of the electron, you end up not knowing where its location is. But if you measure the location of the electron, you don't know what its speed it's going at, because when you observe it, you interrupt it. You deal with it, and so the observer actually interrupts the work of science. And so it was really hard to try to be, like you said, clear about how slow science actually is, because of all the conclusions we've made and used throughout the centuries now.
And not only that, the inconsistency, right? Because it's even if you're doing experiments in a lab, you're not experimenting on people, for the most part, in a large arena. You're
not supposed to be.
Yeah, you're not supposed to.
Unless they're giving you consent.
You're not taking little children and pregnant women and people of all ages with all different kinds of, and then just going, okay, this is safe for everybody because we've tried it on everybody. you're taking a small sample and then projecting it to everybody. It's almost like, baking cake that's really good to your 3 friends and then going, everybody's going to like this cake.
Right.
No, everybody responds differently. And so again, it's not that broad, science.
Yeah, well, again, this goes back to trying to figure out it's hard to define science because people have different beliefs about what it is. To me, it's like a philosophical, systematic study of nature through observation. That's kind of how I look at it. I know maybe you have a slightly different definition. There's a philosophical component because you're saying if I look at nature, there's somehow, or natural processes, that somehow I can get a value benefit. That's an assumption, right? So there's a philosophical nature to anything you do that's in science. The problem is science never said anything. People take science and extrapolate meaning from what they're observing. So in so much as it is a tool that provides what I call policymakers, so people who make decisions, and some of them are scientists, some of them are just people who make decisions for human beings, have to interpret data and say what is good for human beings. And what I don't like on any of the sides is that we shut down conversation.
Right.
Because the idea behind observable science, when it is done well, it is never afraid to be questioned in any sense, because the evidence it needs to explain is always something that never going to be something that you can remove from the equation. So if I'm not capable of explaining the science well enough, then it's not useful. The idea of the science as a tool is that it's supposed to be useful. And so you don't shut down conversations about science, and you may even allow things to just reaffirm the science over and over again, even though you think it's fruitless. But anytime I worry is when a society changes the using it of a tool as a way of learning some information that we as human beings have to decide the value of, to determining what the value is, or that it speaks in and of itself. That's where I start to think of scientism.
So this
which becomes a religious order where only certain people have information that they hear from on high,
and they go outside of their zones.
And when this happens in many different areas of disciplines, like when I go to the doctor, I'll say, what are you doing this test for? And they go, don't worry, it's fine. No, you don't have the right to tell me whether I need to worry or not. You have to explain what you're doing to my body. But also, that's not what science is. If I don't just walk up to people randomly and not tell them what the value benefit is for what it is, especially when it's an experiment of one. You're using my body in comparison to the literature of body that you have, but I'm still part of this equation. So I should be able to ask questions about what's going on. Now, I know how doctors have to deal with irrational people, but that's always going to be what the usefulness of science is. And you can't get away from explaining to normal everyday people like us why you're doing something, and you have to talk on a level that makes it valuable to us, and that may be harder for you, but you don't get to be quote unquote so smart that it's not useful. Right. And that's the problem I have with science in general, is it can be very complicated in a world that doesn't value it.
Let me just read that. I think this is critical, because in the conclusion of his section on science, he says the reason science is so stinking hard to define is, he says, see, we have general. This is J.P. Moreland in Christianity and the Nature of Science, and this is the book I was kind of talking about. And he says we have seen that generally agreed on have seen that a generally agreed on set of necessary and sufficient conditions for something to count as science has not been found.
Yeah.
That is why the statement by Larry Lawden at the beginning of the chapter should serve as a warning to those who attempt to define science so that it is clearly isolated from other disciplines. This popular understanding perpetuates a false notion of what science is and how it works. In other words, what he's saying is we like to define science as a thing outside of all the other disciplines. Yeah. And his point is actually that philosophy undergirds science. You can't do science without good logic.
And science is a philosophy to me.
And this is what's wrong with that guy who's saying there's no free will. They're like, they get the front page of the New York Times that this guy has proven there's no free will, and all the philosophers are going, time out, that he hasn't proven anything here. You can't prove that with what he said.
A statement is not proof.
Well, no, I mean, he has a whole book with scientific literature and all these things, but they're like, there are other worldviews that account for all of this information, and you're not allowing those in. You are making you're actually making a false dichotomy, which is setting up a straw man and knocking it down. See, what happens is science provides evidence for oftentimes a pre-conclusion. And we like to think of scientists as not having pre-conclusions, but we're finding out more and more that many times they have a thought about what they're aiming at, and they're going for it. And sometimes they'll take things they don't understand and draw inferences from them that are philosophically untenable because they are not philosophers. And this is critical. We need to get back to teaching logic. We need to get back to teaching fallacies, because we're going to continue to have bad theology. We're going to continue to have bad science, and we're going to have bad education if we don't return to how to think correctly with the basic things of logic and knowledge. And I do think that fits into this conversation.
And I just want to say this too. I appreciated what you said about the problem with it is people are inferring into the information. So the people are the problem. The science isn't the problem. Well, and I will say this, because we do see it. We do see it in, because I do think that
the science can't
for
be the
us
problem
to
if you
buy
do it wrong.
to buy into the scientific, method and information, it has to be coming from a trusted source. And I feel like we as a culture now, we no longer trust the scientists, and I'm sure there are great scientists doing good work and being integrous with the science, right? And doing everything that we were talking about science is supposed to do. But, it's kind of like, big pharma. If you want to get into conspiracies and political, and I'm not trying to do that.
Both
I'm just bringing these up. I'm just bringing these up because
in the conspiracy
we're all aware of these
You don't even
things.
to go there.
But,
just
but the big pharma thing, right? They're doing all this research, but the big pharma is, funding the research for a certain outcome, and so now it's like, can we really trust that information?
Sure.
And the thing with COVID, when the sides were at battle, right? Part of the battle, I think, wasn't necessarily, hey, we're trying to figure all this out and do what is best. It became a moral issue, right? And science is not moral. I mean, science doesn't dictate morality. It doesn't confirm or deny morality. It is just putting out there the information, and then morality is formed by the information. Correct?
I would say the philosophy of how one should use science is not a full enough system to incorporate everything you need that includes things like morality and how we should treat each other and a lot of the other higher. It can inform
morality is pre-science.
Yeah. So the idea behind it is a way of knowing a certain kind of information. That's how I look at science. But it's limited, and I think people try to cram more into the philosophy of science than it's capable of sustaining. Mm-hmm. And one of those is morality. Science has a bad history with morality if you're looking at the way people conduct it. Because again, science is a tool. And you can use a tool to do harm or to do good. And we have to determine apart sometimes from science based on our worldview, informed by it perhaps, but whether something is good or bad, because that needs to be determined before you engage in the experiment. We have things like the Milgram experiment. We have things like people that were doing experiments on people that were immoral, but at the time no one thought it was immoral until they did the experiment, because no one thought through how should you treat a human being. And that's not a scientific question per se, because you get good data from harming people if you're interested in just the data, especially if the data is collected about harming people.
Which is what we as Christians fear when it comes to science, that it is going to be used with an amoral aspect, meaning science itself, the methodology, is needing a pre-scientific moral structure, or it will be used inappropriately. You can have immoral scientific methods.
Yeah, it's called the Nazi Party.
Right. And you can, it's this idea, like I was saying, that you can't actually use science to develop morality, because then you actually do evil with science to discover what is good and what is evil.
You still wouldn't discover it. You would just have to explain away why you no longer find this useful. And again, I don't know many people want to do that. You want to hurt somebody and then go, well, we changed our mind because it's no longer useful. Well, what if it is useful for some group of people?
Now, because we've abandoned philosophy as a pre-necessary, and morality,
Condition,
and I'm just going to say theology, because I really think theology is the bounds of philosophy.
It's a worldview at the very
and
least.
so our
the bounds
Christian
of morality.
worldview, as our Christian worldview depletes, so science will go amok. It will be used for horrible experimentation. It'll be used for awful things. That's already has been in many ways. And what disappears is your ability to trust a scientist. And so science, where it had this high pedestal, doctors have dropped off because you can't trust them anymore. And the trust was lost because we're discovering things that you guys are doing that we think are immoral. I think the puppy thing was the biggest thing that threw people off the most. They're like, the NIH, you did horrible things to puppies? And it's like, takes torturing puppies, not other horrible things we've done to get people to wake up. But
well, you get Tuskegee experiments and people doing all kinds of evil things against different race or ethnic groups because they felt that they didn't have as much value as the other population. The idea that human beings are only going to do this one direction or another politically is not true. It takes a robust moral belief system where people are holding people accountable to these things that makes science not go in a direction that could be used to harm. It's like any kind of thing that you use in life. It's the same thing with politics, same with these things. They're not done in a vacuum. I think the biggest lie, even with science, is that you try to separate it, isolate it, and only look at the true value of it individually and not as a whole. You don't back up and look at the picture, the bigger picture. And I think that's an abstract way of just making us confused. It's like, look, I want to believe something. If I look close enough at it, I'll see what I want. And you have to
like
back up and see how it connects to everything
It's like
else.
looking at Monet. And Monet is an artist, and he uses dots. And when you get up close to Monet, you're like, that's a really weird looking dot. But you can get really close to all the dots. But when you back up, you get a giant picture. And that's what I think is wrong, is that a lot of times science has become, David Wells argues, most intellectual pursuits have become so narrow that they only know a specific thing, and then they get so arrogant in their specific thing that they assume they know the whole picture now. They say the dot is the picture, but the dot's not the picture.
What's the name of that when you because you're good at one thing, you can assume that you're good at everything.
I can't ever remember it. Yeah. It's brought up a lot, but
but there is an idea that I think that no matter what you're listening to, when you hear the word or have the word PhD after the name, the reason why the credibility has dropped off isn't because I don't think that those things aren't valuable. Is it just because you have them doesn't mean you're a moralist, you're a politician, you're a good scientist, you're good at a science that you don't pursue, or if you've limited your ability. It used to be prior to the 1900s, people wanted to integrate their beliefs more. So even scientists would do math or art or do other subjects because they felt like they wanted to contribute on more than just one level. In the modern age, we feel like if you specialize, once you specialize, you become so smart at that one thing that you automatically know all the other things. And I find that not to be the case. The more you know about only one subject, I think the more you need other people from other subjects to have cross-disciplinary concerns. This has happened even in psychology, where every discipline has a slightly different thing, and when you start putting them together, psychology, socialist, a nurse, a doctor, they start to see the patient better than if you just see them as a mechanical.
It's more robust.
Yeah,
this happens in theology. I was at Talbot, and I was like talking to the New Testament profs, and they would theology and all this stuff, and they get all excited about all these viewpoints in theology, and then I would talk to the Old Testament profs, and they'd be like thinking something completely different. I'm like, have you guys ever thought about having a symposium where you all gather together to talk about the Old Testament and the New Testament at the same time? And like my New Testament prof looked at me like, that's a great idea. I'm like, what do you mean? Like the New Testament comes from the Old Testament. Like, what are we talking about here?
This is why I do think we need to be careful. I think people, no matter how bright or not bright, I think God uses all people in a system that have a certain specialty that needs to be addressed in a community. I just think like science is done best, not just when the scientists do it. It's when they take the science and have to explain it to us who don't do the science, because in that, it has the usefulness that it's meant to intend. If only scientists know what the science is, how is that good for humanity?
Oh, we got the media to do that.
Yeah,
and they never do it well.
But what I mean by that is you need someone what they call it's called face validity, and in science it's a key moment where you need the everyman to look at it and go, on the face of that looks stupid. And that is a valuable tool to anyone in any particular discipline. Even the more I preach or the more I do things, you can learn very complicated things, but if you can't explain them to somebody, they're not really useful anymore. So my whole view is to learn the complications and to bring the value. And to me, that should be the noble task of being a scientist. You should consider yourself someone that's serving the public interest, not just serving your own interests. And that has to do with a moral decision more than it has to do anything else. Some of your best scientists, even when I disagree with them, they at least feel that they're doing that. They feel like they're bringing contributions to society.
I do think that we don't want to get too far afield and end up in a world where you don't trust anything. And that's
the fear that we're headed, yeah.
Scientists and pastors, and I believe most people, your average doctor, your average banker, your average pastor, we are people who still want to be trusted and want to be trustworthy.
Yeah.
I don't think everybody's a crook. And the problem is that we're being told in a cultural milieu that everything's about power. And so now we view science through a vision of power instead of you're just trying to use your scientific power to tell me what to do. And now science becomes politics instead of science being science, and philosophy becomes politics. And it's the greatest cynical move, right? It's the cynical move of the enemy, who wants to tell you, God just has hell because he wants to scare you into going into heaven. He wants to scare you into conversion, and it's like
scare you into controlling you.
And that's exactly why the government puts up why the AAA puts up signs that says don't enter this direction. No, that sign is there. You warn people when they're going in the wrong direction because it's going to harm them and hurt them. But a cynic is going to look at that, and they're going to look at it from power, and they're going to look at it with the most cynical take. And I'm seeing those people who used to pick on the church that way, pick on everything that way. Everything has got some evil, sinister background plot, and you see, even God. Now, does that not sound like a demonic ploy?
Trust no one but yourself?
Yeah. And division. And then what's next? You can't even trust yourself. So trust me that I'm going to give you power. You're going to see an increase in all kinds of weird things as we lose trust, because there's going to be something that fills that void.
Yeah, we live in a world that does want to prove that you tear everybody down and kind of get you into your divisions. And I think that one thing that it's going to take on many different avenues, even if you feel passionately about what you believe, even if it's counter to Christianity, is it's going to take us to agree that the value benefit is in the persuasion and the conversation more so than in the fighting for power. Because if you really believe something is true, you don't want to harm someone for them to believe it. You would want to make the best faith effort to explain it to them first. And both sides of us on Christianity, as people feel like they're losing power or they're losing it to people whose worldviews are different from their power, we can get stuck in that power-based game as well.
Yeah. But I just want to encourage you. Yeah. If you're a Christian and you're part of our church and you're part of you're in the faith, you can never lose the power that God has. He has all the power. And this is why we don't believe in conspiracy theories. This is why we don't fear, even when there's grand institutions marshaling against us, because God is the one who ultimately has the power, and God is the one who ultimately is working all things unto his end and his direction. And this is why, while we can get into the details of science and even can be freaky about things that we discover in science, what they can do with science, and there's a lot of scary things people have planned, God is still capable and powerful enough to shut it all down and take his world. His kingdom cannot be defeated by flesh and blood. It's not going to be defeated by the spiritual. He's already won. All authority in heaven and on earth has been given to Jesus. And so I do want to almost make a clarion call of, you can take a deep breath.
Yeah, everybody
take a breath. It's not as bad as you think it is, because your God is still on the throne. And it's not as scary as you think it is, because your God has redeemed and won. And while the demons want to play the game of making you think you have no power, that you're losing everything, the science is going to do this crazy, there is nothing outside of his purview. And there's nothing that won't be answered for. And if you know him, we have the beautiful hope of that miracle, of that resurrection, and the rule of God for eternity, where none of this happens again. So take a breath, step back, and remember who is really got the power. Who's got the power? Anyway.
Yep.
All right. We got to keep moving, I think.
One last thing, though, I just want to say, though, too, also, for those of you who might be curious in science and you may be feeling like, you might hear some negative things from the church, I would say what you need to know is that it's almost like my faith freed me to believe, or to hear things that I might not be comfortable hearing, because I understood that Christ died for me. And once you know that evidence, that Christ rose from the dead, that verified evidence, there's a lot of things that other people believe or don't believe that I can be scared of or I can be unconcerned with, but it's what I do believe that helps me with my unbelief. And so that's what's helped me explore all kinds of areas of science that I would be uncomfortable to my faith, but not lose it because of it, because I know what I believe comes from that. And so that's what's helped me when I was in some weird science classes.
So we're going to go into the questions thing real quick. But this question, we got a question. So this question does fall in line with this topic very strongly. So I'm going to throw it out there. And I think we can do this very briefly with just a quick reprimand. But along the lines of questions for science, a lot of people I know, and I think online, seem to think that so many things scientifically are the mark of the beast or are leading to the mark of the beast. Things like the COVID vaccine, being able to scan your hand, your phone to make payments, going to cryptocurrencies. These are so fearful, and people are so fearful of new sciences and medicines and technologies. Do we need to be fearful? How can we ease their fears?
Well, I think I just kind of said it a minute ago, that those fears are eased by realizing that even if there was some kind of technological thing that is the mark of the beast, first and foremost, scripturally speaking, you cannot take the mark of the beast and not know that you are doing it. Like, it's just, if it's a physical manifestation. There was a lot of times where people were like, oh, you can get snookered in, then you're not going to heaven. That is not actually how salvation works. Like, it's, the only thing that doesn't send you to heaven.
It reminds me, before my dad gave his life to the Lord, and he was very involved in volunteering at the church because my mom went to church. My mom was a Christian, and this was in my adult years, right? And so he went regularly, always volunteered to help out. And when I tell people, like, pray for my dad, and they're like, what? And I was like, this, he comes to the Lord. Oh, your dad's Joel, right? Yeah, he's a Christian. And I'm like, well, no, he's not. And they're like, no, I think he is a Christian. He just doesn't know it yet. And I'm like, I don't think it works that way. No. I don't think you can run around denying God and then, but you are secretly a Christian because you don't know it.
Yeah, nobody grandfathered in, literally.
I think that it's a good theological adage to remember. No one will be in heaven that didn't want to go to heaven, and nobody's going to be in hell that wanted God in their life. So it's just a critical piece. Like, God's not going to be like, oh, you really want me? Nah, get out of here. That's not how that works. That's never going to work. That's not going to happen. But I think that, again, if I think people get caught into the new latest technological thing, AI being, oh, that's not the mark of the beast, that's the image of the beast or whatever. Some of that is just a hold back and remember you're reading ancient literature that is highly symbolic and representative, and that you can't actually one-to-one correspond it to a up-to-date, situation, what you're staring at. In fact, I would argue at this right now, where I'm at right now, is that when you think of the mark of the beast, it is on the right hand of the forehead. Well, those are the two locations, according to the Shema, you are to write the law.
That's why people wear phylacteries today.
Right. And so it was a symbol in the Jewish mind of your loyalty. And so and I would say that if you get worried about anything that is actually close to the mark of the beast, it will have nothing to do with an actual physical thing on your hand or your forehead. It'll have to do with, are you loyal to Jesus so much that you can't use the marketplace? Will you be so loyal to Jesus that you'll be willing to die? And that is the demarcation. Because guess what? Nobody talks about what's the physical mark of Jesus that shows up earlier in the book. That he says, mark these people with my mark. And that's the same word. It's the same concept. And so there is this loyalty to Jesus. So again, I don't think we need to worry about a newfangled science that pops up and secretly gets injected into your bloodstream and now you don't get to go to heaven. That's not how salvation works. that's great for, selling books and interesting TV, so that you're freaked out and you got to give us money. Right? So conspiracy stuff. And so what I want to do is remind you that it's, that the mark of the beast is in the book of high symbology, and is far more likely talking about your loyalty to Jesus and whether you are willing to suffer for him in those end days, and not give in to the cultural expectations and loyalty to the world.
Okay. All right. So now we have a comment from Susie. It really is not a question, it's a comment. So we appreciate it, Susie. And here is what she wrote. She wrote, "Dear Brent, Greg, and Stephen." So first off, Susie, I want to thank you for ranking us in order of importance. It really does much for my self-esteem.
The first will be last, and the last will be first.
I'm still out.
She says, "I listen irregularly to your podcast." There's your first mistake. Okay, irregularly. Please listen to it regularly. We want to encourage you. It's going to help you become a much better person. And I'm kidding. I'm kidding.
There's no scientific guarantee on those terms.
You know what? No, I think
science isn't out on that one yet.
I think science has proven the why. If you listen to this podcast, why do people become better people? Because they listen to the Rabbit Trail podcast.
Science proved the why. It's the 20.
Yes. So anyway, I'm okay. So I irregularly listen to your podcast on my Apple Podcast app, along with several other podcasts. I really enjoyed the most recent podcast, 113, and it gave me a lot of insight regarding heaven and evangelism. It has encouraged me in my prayer life as the importance of prayer, not so much for my family and friends, for their comfort, safety, and health, although these are good, and I will continue to ask the Lord for these blessings, but even more so for an awareness of our brokenness, our need, and a realization that we are not worthy, but God so loved. I love what Greg said, that Christians and I need to live love, especially when it is hard to love. This is convicting. This is difficult. It reminds me of how much I need God. I need the power of the Holy Spirit every day, always. Thank you for sharing on the Rabbit Trail. Sincerely, Susie Society. Thank you, Susie, for those words and your commitment to listening to the podcast. I know you've been a long-time listener. And I know you also mentioned, too, on these notes that you like to listen to the podcast at bedtime because it helps put you to sleep. So, but here's the question we got from Rick. And it says, "Men, a few weeks ago, Nick brought up a concern related to taking creative liberties when depicting Bible stories, such as The Chosen. Could you expand on this? Thanks, Rick." Number one, I'll let you guys shoot in here, but number one, I would just say we did discuss that when he did bring it up, or shortly before he brought it up. I don't remember if you were in that conversation and we were talking about the arts and all that stuff. Mm-hmm. Okay.
We've talked about it a couple of times.
I would say it is probably like episode 107, between 107 and 111 probably.
That is neither scientifically confirmed either.
Yeah, but I think it was that recent because I know that he mentioned it in his sermon, and he only preached like 4 weeks ago. So he did on Palm Sunday. Right. So it was right around Palm Sunday that we did discuss that. So you could go back and listen to that.
The week after.
But go ahead, and we may have done it before because I may have talked to him in the office before he preached. So. But just what are you guys' takes on that? Expanding on like The Chosen and really
it is an ancient form of worship that Christians have done since the very beginning. We have been writing extra stories and pontificating about the life of Christ and talking about miracles and things of the apostles since the Gospels were created. The difference is that never did the fathers of the church or anybody say, you can't do that. What they did say is, don't ever use that stuff for scripture. That's not scripture. But to write a story or to write a fiction based on Christ and to represent that fiction well isn't wrong. It's just not wrong. It's in fact, it's a form of worship and a form of celebration. And so we can't, look, don't use it as a Bible study, and don't use it, don't use it as fact. Enjoy it as a story. And I do think you can gain some like cool insights in the sense of like, wow, I like how the actor portrayed that. In my head, he was always angry. I never thought about saying it in a way that would sound like that. That's, wow. I think that kind of stuff's cool when it's scripture speaking directly. But again, some of this is research. Some of it is semi-background. Some of it's not even close. Like some of it's just for the sake of art and trying to tell a great story to an American audience. Go ahead, Stephen. I know how you feel.
And then the other part of that, I know what Nick was talking about too, was do not form a graven image. So these people are depicting Christ. So that imagery of I am Christ, is there something creepy or nefarious about doing that?
Yeah, no, I mean, like Greg said, the church has done this a lot throughout the years. Also, even the debate within the church has been that way throughout the years. But to me, I don't think you're creating a graven image because we're not worshiping it. And so if you are getting to the point where you can't distinguish your Bible from art, then that's a personal issue that you should probably withdraw yourself from the art, because you're starting to conflate the truth of Scripture with something. But oftentimes the opposite is true. There's a way in which we depersonalize Christ by making it a black and white printed page. And as a person who literally was involved in passion plays for many years, you get a greater sense of what crucifixion was like when you're hoisted up on a cross and you see it physically. And this is why the church historically did art, and was involved in trying to get people to think in all of their faculties,
stained glass windows.
Yeah, about things like that. And what happens is if you have this very sterile, we can never extrapolate or speculate or have a conversation about what things might have been. You have a very boring culture, and it's very dry. But also, there are many times that some of the greatest ways in which people were influenced to come to the Lord were through those moments of seeing a portrayal of Christ in some way that made them actually read the book. So oftentimes what draws you into like the Lord of the Rings is you watch this phenomenal movie that's not quite the Lord of the Rings, but close enough to get you the spirit of what's going on there, and it makes you go back and read the original source material. That's what I would hope would happen with any good Christian art, is it would reflect some aspect of God, but not necessarily have to be accurate in everything that it does, because it's trying to give you a portrayal. Accuracy is a weird thing for art. I don't know why people require Christian art to be precise in such a fashion that's unique to any other form of art. Like a lot of times people go, well, I would watch, you'll watch all kinds of bad things, but then they'll be like, I think that's kind of Christian. You watch The Matrix and be like, oh, it reminds me of my Christianity. But then you watch The Passion, you're like, well, that's bad. I'm like, how do you reconcile those two things? Literally, that is closer to the text than the other one in my opinion, but you valued it differently, because I think art does something that gets you to think in a certain way, and it's not as black and white.
Yeah, and I think going back to the idea that you shall make no graven images of me, the commandment, again, this is for worship. This was a literal.
You're not worshiping it.
The Hebrews made statues. We find statues all over the place. They just didn't worship them. They made mosaics all over the floors of all kinds of. It was the early form of stained glass.
Second Temple Judaism had wonderful mosaics on the floor, and
you'd
be surprised what was there.
Yeah, some of it's astrology.
Some
weird,
of it's biblical interpretations of Abraham and things.
J.I. Packer, in his book Knowing God, wrote his original version. Right, and he talks about this very fact, and he makes a very strong stance on Christian art and not representing, Jesus, but he got massive pushback. So in his revision, he went back and rethought through it, and he's like, actually, you're right. And he said, look, the problem, and this is where I start to struggle, is if you start showing an image of Jesus during like one of our worship songs. Like if we were to suddenly show the background of the Passion of the Christ, or you had suddenly showing like The Chosen while you're singing and worshiping God as if you're trying to portray Jesus, that gets too close, and that's not cool for me. That's why we're not icon. That's why we don't have icons. You bow down to an icon. That's idolatry. Watching a film that is supposed to be an homage, a worship, a celebration of Jesus, but it's or an attempt to kind of like flesh out the disciples. I really find it more of a flesh out of the disciples than even necessarily Jesus. And to me, it's creative art, and it's not intended for worship.
Speculative in many ways, but not done out of the spirit of what could possibly have been there at the time.
And so it's not outside of our realm to be able to do that kind of artwork. And now I think that, again, reverence. How do you portray a sinless Jesus? I wouldn't want to try to do it.
It's difficult.
And so there's there's a reverence there, and there's a seriousness there, and it's not easy, but it's something that I think that they've attempted to be careful with. And yeah, he's getting himself in, the director's getting himself in some interesting situations.
I think we really are hard on Christian art in general.
We are. We destroy
hard
it.
to
We
do.
We want good arts, and when we start to get them, we tear them apart.
It's just the standard for us is always. I don't mind it being harder. I just mind it being untenable. Like to things that we engage and consume in our culture, we never question. But as soon as we put it on the stage at church, the scrutiny is so high that you would never be able to do a play half the time. Even from like two people that aren't married portraying like they're married, that really bothers people on a stage, and no one's worked through the theology of some of this. But
people have. It's just not well known.
It's just not well known. But I think we need to think a little bit more about it, because I do think, like with the Bible Project, the reason why they change up their art style for so often is because of that. They want to keep it artistic, and so they use different. And like someone's like, "Why does Jesus look blue?" Because it's a abstract that they're trying to keep the reverence for it. And sometimes it looks more like what you see, and other times it looks completely different, because they want to give as many interpretations to that to get you to think.
Yeah. So now you had a question online?
Yeah, there's a bit of a question online for science, and some of these.
One of the things I just want to point out, though, for the Chosen. I mean, the one thing I appreciate, number one, it's based on a true story. It's not, it's not like verbatim. The
book's always better.
You mean that's like what they should say at the beginning?
Based on a true story. Because it basically,
and most of those are
this story really happened, but there's a lot of made up stuff in there.
Loosely based on a story that might have happened.
But the worst is like when it's based on real events, right? Yeah. It's just like
roughly based on real events.
These things probably happen.
Oh, and then they've always got the disclaimer at the end where it says any names or things that are similar are not actually the real people, and so don't sue us.
But one of the things I appreciate about The Chosen is, as it's depicting Christ, he is sarcastic, and he makes these jokes, and it just affirms in me, yes, sarcasm is my spiritual gift, and Jesus modeled it for me.
You're blessed with the spirit of sarcasm. I mean, God is sarcastic. There are some very sarcastic moments in the scriptures. So I don't know if it's a gift, but it's definitely imaging God at some level.
It's a useful tool, like science.
All right. What's the online? And then
so this is related to the last week's sermon. That's why I want to say there's a couple statements, but I think this is a good kind of wrap both of these statements up. But the question is related to the sermon. So this is the divine design, finding meaning in God's creation, which is a clip that you had from.
Yeah, I don't think the clip didn't finish. So I saw it.
What he says, sand grains are effectively randomly sized and shaped, yet you shake them hard, fast, and long enough, and they sort themselves into a uniform pattern. I guess that means someone meticulously designed each piece of sand, right? And so the question is more of it appears to be random.
Again, this is a great indication of taking a piece to argue for the whole, and I'm trying to just lay out the whole as broadly as I possibly can. And so, yes, you take sand grains are randomly created as they fall off and they rush into the waves, all that stuff, and come off the mountains and down the shores, or when we literally bring them out from the desert and drop them off at the beach, as some beaches do. But which I found out recently. Wow. That was weird.
I didn't know that.
So, yeah, because they want a particular sand there because they like that sand feel. So anyway, yeah, when you take objects like Legos and you start to shake them, they sort into smaller and larger objects. And that's really cool how things that are heavier go to the bottom, and how things are smaller find their way up to the top. And sometimes you'll even get this with viscosity and liquids and stuff like that, and they'll separate themselves out. And there are laws that help design those pieces, but that doesn't mean anything about the fact that it's really cool to us that we get to observe it. And so I think that it's ignoring the fact that you know it. Don't ignore the fact that you actually know that when you shake the Lego box or the sand grains, they sort themselves. Like, that takes a sophisticated set of design to discover it.
It also takes a shaker.
Right. But it takes
a willful shaking act.
Even more important is that even if it was a random earthquake that did it, it still takes the observer to see it and know that something's happened. The knowledge of the event in and of itself is something that you can't account for with the randomness. Otherwise, you become yourself a random observer, and it's just a random thing. You have no reason to believe it actually happened. It's a random firing of chemistry in your head. Why would you believe that belief, which is just an instance of your neurons firing?
Yeah. And remember, you have to pick and choose sometimes. Either everything has a cause and effect based on a world that has determinism because of, there is no God, or things have patterns, and those patterns are often determined by an agent.
And so I would advise you take a peek at a book that is out there called it's by Stephen Meyer, and it's his first one on, oh man, I can't believe I'm going to forget this. You could try the God hypothesis and go backwards, but he's the return of the God hypothesis hits all his stuff. But I believe his Darwin's doubt deals with all of the transformations of phyla and different things like that. And then his book prior to that is really the one that deals with that question, and it's dealing with the fact of information existence in the DNA. That there is this guy named Dean Kenyon who was the propagator and wrote the book called Biological Predestination, and has since rejected his entire theory because he knows DNA cannot be biologically predestined. There is no way to produce informative sophisticated code language with randomness. There's a different, and they'll get into the difference between Shannon information and sophisticated information. And so there's a lot there. And so one of the problems with that kind of an argument is that you don't shake the earth and wind up with humans.
With a very sophisticated pattern.
Right. In fact, like we said earlier, you take one part of the machine out, you could shake the machine all you want, and that machine's not going to change. Fine-grained sands are different than a sophisticated engineered machine.
Yeah. If I shake Legos, they follow a pattern, but they don't form the Eiffel Tower at a very sophisticated plan.
Right. They're not actually going to form anything.
Yeah.
So
perfectly laid on top of each other.
That would be my response basically to that.
All right. Well, that wraps it up. Before you sign us off, I want to say good night, Susie, as you're listening to this podcast for
this is the ASMR podcast.
We hope that you sleep well.
Sleep well.
Melatonin. Yes.
Take your melatonin.
Thank you for allowing us to be your melatonin. Good night.
Good night. Well, we're so glad that you joined us here on this Olive Branch podcast,
ASMR podcast of sleep.
And so as you enjoy your sleep tonight, we pray that God would bless you. But if you have questions or strange dreams that you'd like to share with us, please let us know, and you can send those emails to rabbittrail@obcc.church. That would be rabbittrail@obcc.church, and we hope to hear from you soon. God bless.
Boom chakalaka.
Good night.